Yes, Elon Musk, the gentleman currently juggling electric cars, rockets to Mars, and the occasional social media firestorm, has now firmly added demographic doommonger to his ever-expanding resume. He's not sounding the alarm about an asteroid, a rogue AI, or even a particularly bad batch of his own tequila. No, his latest existential threat is far more intimate: a global baby shortage. He's gone so far as to warn that declining global fertility rates could lead to the mass extinction of entire nations. Now, when a man who, as of August 2024, has fathered a full dozen children starts ringing the alarm bells about a lack of babies, you might be forgiven for thinking he's just trying to make the rest of us feel inadequate in the procreation department. But his concern, which he's been publicly nursing since at least 2017, has recently escalated to a truly operatic level of panic, particularly regarding the future cradle count in Europe. This most recent surge of apocalyptic prophecy from Mr. Musk was apparently ignited by some rather sobering spreadsheets. An analyst by the name of Marko Jukic presented data highlighting severe nosedives in fertility rates across a range of countries, including the United States, China, Japan, and, crucially for this discussion, several European nations such as Poland and Spain. Jukic's figures painted a grim picture. A fertility rate dipping below 1.6 children per woman could, theoretically, slash a population by half within just 3 generations. And if that rate were to plunge below 1.2, well, hold on to your hats, because that could precipitate an 80% population collapse. So, you can perhaps understand why Musk, a man whose entire empire is built on thinking big and exponentially, might see these numbers and immediately reach for the largest, reddest panic button available. Probably one labeled, "Civilization in Imminent Peril." And where, you might ask, does our visionary billionaire suggest that Europe, a continent seemingly losing its reproductive mojo, should look for a little pick-me-up in the baby-making department? Well, according to reports filtering through the news cycle, Musk has gestured towards the generally higher birth rates observed in some Muslim-majority countries. He has ostensibly implied that their demographic robustness could serve as some sort of blueprint for a Europe apparently struggling to remember the birds and the bees. Now, this isn't just a casual, off-the-cuff remark over canapes. It's a comparison loaded with enough cultural, religious, and political dynamite to make a UN peacekeeping mission look like a quiet game of chess. It's akin to suggesting your meticulously organized, very quiet accountant should take life advice from a troupe of improvisational mimes. Bold, perhaps even startling, but guaranteed to provoke more than a few raised eyebrows and a flurry of "what exactly do you mean by that?" Of course, this isn't Musk's debut performance in the theater of demographic dread. Cast your minds back to January 2022, when he famously derided United Nations population projections, those meticulously compiled forecasts by actual trained demographers, as utter nonsense. His central thesis then, as it remains now, is that the paramount crisis facing humanity isn't overpopulation, but its stark opposite: a precipitous, catastrophic decline in birth rates that demands immediate and drastic reversal. He's not simply idly tweeting into the digital ether. He appears genuinely convinced that humanity is on a demographic collision course with oblivion, unless we all collectively start treating procreation with the same fervent seriousness he applies to, say, tunneling under cities or attempting to implant chips in our brains. It's a remarkably consistent message, even if the decibel level seems to be steadily increasing. So let's delve into these numbers that are causing such a continental commotion. Europe, the cradle of Western civilization, renowned for its ancient architecture, its culinary delights, and now it seems, its increasingly empty maternity wards. In the year 2024, France, a nation often associated with romance, reportedly boasted the highest total fertility rate, TFR, among a selection of listed European countries, registering a figure of 1.63. While that might sound relatively healthy, it's still considerably below the crucial replacement rate, a concept we'll unpack in just a moment. Meanwhile, other European nations are staring into a demographic chasm that's considerably deeper and darker. Consider countries like South Korea or Hong Kong, where TFRs are so astonishingly low they make a Trappist monk look like a party animal. These aren't merely abstract statistics, they translate into future classrooms with fewer students and, down the line, societies grappling with a profoundly altered age structure. Now let's address Mr. Musk's rather pointed comparison. It is indeed true that, on average, many Muslim-majority countries have historically exhibited, and some continue to exhibit, higher fertility rates than numerous European nations. However, it's crucial to understand that this Muslim world is an incredibly diverse tapestry of nations, and applying a monolithic label is about as accurate as saying all European music is Oompa bands and Eurovision rejects. Fertility rates fluctuate dramatically based on factors like economic development, the educational attainment of women, access to comprehensive family planning services, and deeply ingrained cultural norms. For instance, some of the affluent oil-producing Gulf states have witnessed quite rapid declines in their own fertility rates in recent decades. So, while a broad-stroke contrast can be drawn, the notion of a singular Muslim country model for Europe to emulate is, to put it mildly, a significant oversimplification of a complex global mosaic of family sizes and societal trends. Let's take a moment to define our terms, specifically that rather important acronym, TFR, or total fertility rate. It sounds like something you'd calculate for a particularly fertile field, but in demography, it represents the average number of children a woman would be expected to have over her entire reproductive lifetime, assuming current age-specific fertility patterns persist. Think of it as a nation's reproductive batting average. For a population to merely sustain itself, to neither shrink nor expand significantly, setting aside the complexities of immigration for a moment, the TFR generally needs to hover around 2.1. Why the extra 0.1, you ask? Well, it accounts for the unfortunate reality that not every child born will survive to reproductive age, and also for the slight statistical imbalance of more male births than female. So when countries like France are at 1.63, or Spain and Poland are languishing even lower, they are substantially below that critical break-even point. This, over time, inevitably leads to fewer young people available to support a burgeoning elderly population, a demographic imbalance that spells serious long-term societal and economic headaches. But wait, the plot thickens. Because apparently this isn't merely a straightforward equation of social policies plus religious adherence equals babies. Jacob Hornstein, an academic voice from the University of Austin, introduces a rather intriguing wrinkle by suggesting that exclusively social factors might not be sufficient to explain the widespread global decline in birth rates. He highlights fascinating anomalies, such as Bahrain, a Muslim-majority nation, which, counterintuitively, exhibits a lower birth rate than the predominantly atheist Czechia. This observation hints at the possibility of other, perhaps more profound, factors influencing reproductive trends, potentially even, and this is where it gets really spicy, genetic predispositions towards having larger or smaller families. If true, this would add an entirely new layer of complexity, suggesting that simply exhorting Europe, be more like country X, might be overlooking a rather significant and deeply embedded part of the demographic puzzle. Alright, so Elon Musk is on his digital soapbox dramatically proclaiming mass extinction, as Europe collectively scratches its head. But what do the individuals who dedicate their professional lives to studying population trends actually make of all this high-decibel alarmism? Well, many scientists and academics, while readily acknowledging that declining birth rates are indeed a tangible phenomenon, tend to view Musk's choice of terminology as, shall we say, slightly excessive. The term mass extinction, they will patiently explain, is generally reserved for rather more definitive biological finales. Think of the dinosaurs looking up to see a rather large space rock, or the dodo bird waddling into oblivion, or perhaps even the slow demise of the fax machine. While a shrinking human population represents a significant demographic transformation, it's not quite synonymous with humanity itself vanishing from the planet in the immediate future. It's perhaps more akin to a slow societal deflation rather than an abrupt asteroid-induced game over. In fact, some experts such as Professor Stein Emil Volset from the esteemed Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation, IHME, propose that these declining fertility rates aren't necessarily the harbingers of doom that some fear. Instead, they can be interpreted as reflecting some decidedly positive societal advancements. Consider this. Improved and more widespread access to contraception empowers individuals, particularly women, with greater control over their family planning decisions. Furthermore, increasing numbers of women are pursuing higher education and building fulfilling careers, which often leads to choices to delay childbirth or to have fewer children overall. These are generally celebrated as indicators of societal progress and female empowerment, not as omens of impending civilizational collapse. From this particular vantage point, lower birth rates can be seen as an almost natural byproduct of society getting in several important respects demonstrably better and more equitable. However, this optimistic interpretation doesn't mean there are no legitimate anxieties entangled in this demographic shift. Even if the mass extinction rhetoric is a significant exaggeration, a rapidly aging population coupled with a shrinking workforce can undeniably generate very real and substantial economic and social strains. Who, precisely, is going to fund the pensions for an ever larger cohort of retirees? Who will provide the necessary care for the growing elderly population? Will innovation falter and economic dynamism wane if there are fewer young, energetic minds entering the workforce? These are the pressing questions that keep actual policymakers, not just visionary billionaires with a penchant for grand pronouncements, awake at night. So, while the sky may not be falling in the dramatic Muskian sense, there are undoubtedly some crucial structural beams in our societal edifice that are beginning to creak rather ominously, particularly in countries experiencing very sharp and sustained declines in birth rates. It's less Armageddon now, and more we have a very serious long-term infrastructure challenge that requires immediate attention. And this is precisely where the conversation veers into particularly sensitive and ethically challenging territory. Organizations such as the UK-based Charity Population Matters have articulated significant unease regarding the type of narrative being propelled by figures like Musk. They express concern that framing population decline as an existential crisis could inadvertently or even intentionally pave the way for policies that exert pressure, whether subtle or overt, on individuals, predominantly women, to have more children. This, they argue, carries the inherent risk of curtailing hard-won reproductive freedoms. The apprehension is that the societal focus could shift from prioritizing individual choice, autonomy, and well-being to meeting national demographic quotas, a path that has historically led to some deeply problematic and coercive outcomes. Suddenly, a woman's uterus can be reframed as a matter of national strategic importance, which is seldom a positive development for personal liberty or gender equality. So, if you're a government official nervously watching your nation's demographic pyramid slowly invert, transforming into something resembling a giant top-heavy spinning top, what on earth are you supposed to do? Well, some countries are already deep in the throes of trying to figure that out, experimenting with a diverse array of pro-natalist policies designed to encourage more baby-making. South Korea, currently grappling with one of the lowest birth rates on the entire planet, has taken the rather drastic step of establishing an entirely new government ministry, specifically tasked with addressing what they've officially termed a national emergency. France, ever the pioneer in matters of social engineering, has reportedly floated proposals for fertility testing, presumably with the aim of nudging citizens to consider parenthood sooner rather than later. And on the other side of the world, China is reportedly dabbling in state-sponsored matchmaking services, which sounds alarmingly like your most embarrassing aunt being given a government budget and a national mandate to find you a spouse. Good luck with that, everyone. But here lies the significant ethical quandary. Attempting to engineer a baby boom is a venture fraught with numerous moral tripwires and potential unintended consequences. At what precise point does gentle encouragement morph into unacceptable coercion? How can a state effectively promote childbirth without simultaneously infringing upon an individual's fundamental right to decide if, when, and how many children they wish to bring into the world? These are not straightforward questions with easy answers. There exists a very fine, often blurry line between implementing supportive family policies, such as providing affordable, high-quality childcare or offering generous parental leave schemes, and instituting measures that feel uncomfortably like the state peering into citizens' private lives and demanding a reproductive contribution to the national tally. The potential for governmental overreach and the disproportionate societal pressure often placed on women are very real and pressing concerns for ethicists and human rights advocates alike. And just to ensure the policy-making process remains thoroughly complicated and headache-inducing, we have that persistent wild card, the genetic argument. Remember Jacob Hornstein and his observations? He, along with a historical nod to Ronald Fisher's theories from the 1930s, posits that a considerable portion of the variance in fertility rates, perhaps as much as 50%, according to some studies involving twins, could be influenced by genetic factors. If this hypothesis holds substantial water, then simply throwing public money at the issue through broad initiatives like child tax credits might not be the universally effective silver bullet that some policymakers hope for. Hornstein even provocatively suggests that financial subsidies might be more effectively targeted towards individuals who already demonstrate a clear and expressed desire for children, a proposal which, while perhaps logical from a purely utilitarian perspective, immediately opens up an entirely new and ethically challenging can of worms. Imagine the bureaucratic nightmare of applying for a procreation grant. The forms alone would be enough to deter anyone. Ultimately, Elon Musk's characteristically dramatic pronouncements have undeniably thrust the complex issue of declining fertility rates firmly into the global spotlight, igniting a much-needed, albeit sometimes excessively alarmist public conversation. Europe, along with numerous other regions across the globe, is indeed navigating a significant demographic transition, one that carries profound implications for the future structure and functioning of societies. The core challenge lies in addressing these legitimate concerns in a responsible and ethical manner. This necessitates finding a delicate equilibrium between acknowledging the potential societal strains posed by an aging population and steadfastly safeguarding individual reproductive autonomy and freedom of choice. It means meticulously crafting policies that genuinely support families and children without resorting to measures that are coercive, discriminatory, or that undermine fundamental human rights. There are no simple, one-size-fits-all solutions here, only a complex evolving debate that demands thoughtful, nuanced consideration, not just headline-grabbing predictions of impending extinction. It's fundamentally about thoughtfully navigating the future, not just frantically trying to populate it,